For 15 years I had been the family's go-to person for medical emergencies. When Mom had her gallbladder surgery, I took 2 weeks off work to care for her. When Dad's diabetes got out of control, I drove him to every appointment and managed his medication schedule. When my sister Sarah broke her leg skiing, I flew out to Colorado and stayed with her for a month during recovery. I was the one with the medical background, an MD from Johns Hopkins, board-certified in emergency medicine, and department head at Regional Medical Center. But to my family, I wasn't Dr. Jennifer Walsh. I was just Jenny, the reliable one who handled the messy, inconvenient parts of life while they focused on more important things. The pattern was always the same. Crisis hits, family panics, Jenny fixes everything, family moves on without acknowledgement. Sarah would throw lavish dinner parties to celebrate her amazing recovery, and never mention the person who fed her, bathed her, and drove her to physical therapy for weeks. Mom would post Facebook updates about her miracle healing, and forget to mention who slept in hospital chairs and advocated with doctors when she couldn't speak for herself. For 15 years I accepted this. I told myself it was what family did for each other. I ignored the fact that when I had minor surgeries or even just the flu, my phone stayed silent. "You're the doctor," Dad would say if I mentioned feeling unwell. "You can handle it yourself." The accident happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I was driving to the hospital for my early shift when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my car at 50 miles per hour. The impact crushed the driver's side, and I spent the next 6 hours in surgery for internal bleeding, a collapsed lung, and a traumatic brain injury that left me in a medically induced coma. My colleague Dr. Martinez called my emergency contact, my mother, within an hour of my admission. "Jennifer is in critical condition," he told her. "We don't know when she'll wake up. The family should be here." Mom's response? "Oh my goodness, that's terrible. We're just so busy right now with Sarah's engagement party this weekend. Keep us updated." No one came that first day, or the second, or the third. The nurses who knew me from working together for 8 years were shocked. "Where's your family, Dr. Walsh?" they kept asking. I had always talked about my parents, my sister, my nephew. I had pictures of them on my desk, took calls from them during breaks, covered their medical bills when insurance fell short. "They must be traveling," the nurses assumed. "They'll be here soon." But no one came. Not when I developed pneumonia from the ventilator. Not when my condition deteriorated and doctors weren't sure I'd survive. Not when I finally opened my eyes after 3 weeks and whispered my first words. Dr. Martinez visited me every day. So did the nurses from my department. My hospital colleagues brought flowers, read me the newspaper, played music they thought I'd like. The cleaning staff stopped by to check on me. But my family? Radio silence. On day 10, Sarah finally called the hospital. Not to check on me, but to ask a nurse if I'd be back to normal soon because she needed help planning her wedding. When the nurse explained I was still in a coma with unknown neurological damage, Sarah said, "Well, let us know when she's functional again," and hung up. The nurses were horrified. One of them, Maria, had worked with me for 6 years. "Dr. Walsh talks about her family constantly," she told Dr. Martinez. "She's always covering their medical bills, giving them medical advice, flying out for their emergencies. Where are they?" I heard some of these conversations during my semi-conscious periods. I heard the nurses' concern, their anger on my behalf, their confusion about my family's absence. But I also heard something else, their profound respect for me as a colleague in person. "Dr. Walsh saved my daughter's life in the ER," one said. "She stayed 4 hours past her shift to make sure she was stable." When I finally woke up fully after 3 weeks, the physical recovery was brutal. Brain injury rehabilitation, relearning to walk, managing chronic pain, rebuilding my stamina. But the emotional recovery was worse. I had to face the reality that my family had abandoned me during the most critical medical crisis of my life. The first call came from Mom on day 22. Not to check on my condition, but because Dad needed a referral to a cardiologist and she couldn't figure out how to navigate insurance. "Oh, you're awake," she said when I answered weakly. "Great. Listen, your father has been having chest pains and you know how he worries. Can you call Dr. Peterson's office and get him an appointment? You know they'll squeeze him in if you ask." I was barely able to sit up in bed. I was relearning how to write my own name. But she wanted me to make phone calls for Dad's routine checkup. "I'm still in the hospital, Mom," I said quietly. "I know, honey, but this is important. Dad's really worried and you know how his anxiety gets when he thinks something's wrong with his heart." The doctor will listen to you. I hung up without making the call. Something had fundamentally shifted during those 3 weeks of abandonment. For the first time in my life, I said no to my family's medical demands. The second call came a week later from Sarah. She'd heard through hospital staff that I was finally conscious, and she needed me to review her fiancé Mike's weird rash via photos she wanted to text me. "It's probably nothing," she said breezily, "but you know how men are about medical stuff. Just take a quick look and tell me if he needs to see someone." "Sarah," I said slowly, "I've been in a coma for 3 weeks. You never visited. You never called to check on my condition. And now you want free medical advice. Don't be dramatic, Jenny. You're fine now, obviously, since you're talking. And this rash thing is really bothering Mike. It'll take you 2 seconds to look at a photo." I hung up on her too. The recovery took 4 months. 4 months of intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, cognitive rehabilitation, and psychological counseling to deal with the trauma. 4 months during which my family called exactly 6 times, each time requesting medical favors, referrals, or free consultations for their various minor health concerns. Never once did anyone ask about my recovery. Never once did anyone visit. Never once did anyone offer to help with my medical bills, grocery shopping, or transportation to appointments, all things I had provided for them countless times over the years. I spent those 4 months not just healing physically, but evaluating my entire relationship with my family. The hospital social worker helped me see patterns I'd been blind to for years. "You've been their personal, unpaid medical concierge for decades," she observed. "But when you needed medical support, they disappeared. That's not normal family behavior." He was right. I had been their emergency medical contact, their insurance navigator, their treatment coordinator, their specialist referral service, their medical bill backup plan, and their personal physician for minor concerns. I had spent thousands of dollars on their healthcare costs and hundreds of hours managing their medical needs. But I wasn't their daughter or sister. I was their free medical service. And when I couldn't provide that service, they had no use for me. I returned to work in July, 6 months after the accident. My colleagues welcomed me back with genuine warmth and relief. "We missed you, Dr. Walsh," the nurses said. "The department wasn't the same without you." Patients who remembered me from before the accident thanked me for the care I'd provided their families. At work I was valued. At home I was exploitation. The call that changed everything came in September, 6 months after I'd returned to work. Mom called, and for once she sounded genuinely panicked. "Jenny, thank God you answered. We need your help urgently. Something terrible has happened." My first instinct was the old one: drop everything and fix their crisis. But I'd learned to pause, to think, to protect myself. "What's wrong?" I asked carefully. "It's about the malpractice suit. You remember Mrs. Henderson, Dad's patient who died during surgery 3 years ago? Her family is suing Dad for $2.3 million, and our lawyer says we need documentation from the hospital medical board that the standard of care was followed. The insurance company is threatening to drop us if we can't provide board certification that the procedure was appropriate." My blood went cold. I remembered Mrs. Henderson. She was 67, diabetic, and Dad had insisted on operating despite clear surgical risks I had advised against when he consulted me privately. I had told him the surgery was too dangerous, that medical management would be safer, but he'd dismissed my concerns as overcautious and proceeded anyway. Mrs. Henderson had died on the table from complications I had specifically warned him about. "The lawyer says we need a medical board review and certification from someone with authority at Regional Medical Center," Mom continued frantically. "Someone who can officially state that Dad followed proper protocol. You know people there, right? Can you get us that documentation?" I was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, when Dad had asked my opinion about Mrs. Henderson's case, I had given him detailed medical advice based on her chart. He had ignored it completely. When Mrs. Henderson died, he never mentioned my warnings. When the family threatened to sue, he never asked for my support or testimony. Now they needed me to provide official medical board documentation to save him from a $2.3 million malpractice judgment. "Jenny, are you there? This is really urgent. The deadline for providing this documentation is next week, and if we can't get board certification, the insurance company won't cover the lawsuit. We'll lose everything: the house, Dad's practice, our entire savings." "I understand," I said quietly. "You need medical board certification from Regional Medical Center." Exactly. Can you call someone there? Maybe that Dr. Martinez you work with? Someone who can review the case and provide official documentation. Mom, I said slowly, I need to tell you something. What? Jenny, we really don't have time for. I am the medical board. Silence. What do you mean? She asked weakly. I mean, I chair the medical board at Regional Medical Center. I have for 2 years. Any official medical board review and certification has to come through me. Personally. The silence stretched longer. You're the chairman? Yes. The position you're asking me to use my connections to reach? That's my position. The authority you need for board certification? That's my authority. The person who will review Dad's case and determine whether proper medical protocol was followed? That's me. I could hear her breathing, but she couldn't speak. And Mom? I remember Mrs. Henderson's case very clearly. I remember the consultation Dad requested. I remember the detailed medical advice I gave him about surgical risks. I remember him dismissing my concerns as overcautious. I remember him proceeding with a surgery I explicitly advised against. And I remember Mrs. Henderson dying from exactly the complications I warned him about. More silence. The medical board review will be very thorough. We'll examine all consultation records, including the detailed written advice I provided Dad before Mrs. Henderson's surgery. We'll compare his actions to standard medical protocol. We'll determine whether he followed appropriate procedures or ignored medical advice from a board-certified emergency medicine physician. Jenny, she whispered, you can't, we're family. Family. I said quietly. You left me in a coma for 3 weeks. No visits. No calls. No concern for my survival or recovery. But now you need the authority and position you never acknowledged I had, and suddenly I'm family again. I could hear Dad in the background asking what was wrong, asking what I was saying. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. The medical board will review Dad's case according to standard protocol. We'll examine all medical records, including consultation documentation. We'll interview all relevant medical professionals who provided advice. And we'll determine whether proper medical standards were followed. But we're your parents, Mom said desperately. You can't do this to us. We'll lose everything. Mom, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing my job as medical board chair. The same job I've had for 2 years while you thought I was just Jenny who could get you appointments. The same professional position I held while I was in a coma and you couldn't be bothered to visit. I paused, thinking about all those years of emergency calls, all those medical bills I'd covered, all those appointments I'd arranged, all those times I'd dropped everything to handle their medical crises. You know what's interesting? I continued. For 15 years, you've treated me like your personal medical concierge. Free consultations, referrals, bill paying, appointment scheduling, emergency care coordination. But you never saw me as the medical professional I actually am. You never respected my education, my expertise, or my position. I was just convenient. Dad got on the phone. Jenny, you're being ridiculous. Of course we respect your career. But this is family business. You can't let professional rules destroy your own father. Dad, when Mrs. Henderson needed surgery 3 years ago, and you asked my professional medical opinion, was that family business or professional consultation? That was... You were helping me think through a difficult case. I was providing expert medical consultation based on my training and experience. I reviewed her chart. I assessed her surgical risks. I provided detailed written advice recommending against surgery. That wasn't your daughter talking, Dad. That was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, board-certified emergency medicine physician, giving you professional medical guidance. But you ignored that professional medical advice completely. You never mentioned my consultation when Mrs. Henderson died. You never referenced my warnings when the family threatened to sue. You dismissed my medical expertise then, but now you want to use my medical authority to save you. I could hear Mom crying in the background. The medical board review will be comprehensive and fair. We'll examine all the evidence, including the consultation records showing that you received and ignored expert medical advice from a qualified physician. The board will determine whether proper medical protocols were followed. Jenny, please, Dad said desperately. We're your family. We love you. This lawsuit will destroy us. Dad, where was that love when I was fighting for my life in a coma? Where was that family connection when I needed support during the most critical medical crisis I've ever faced? I hung up the phone and sat quietly in my office, looking at the framed diplomas on my wall. Johns Hopkins Medical School. Board Certification in Emergency Medicine. Regional Medical Center Department Head. Medical Board Chairman. For years my family had seen none of this. They had seen only Jenny, the convenient family member who fixed their medical problems. They had never acknowledged my professional achievements, my medical expertise, or my leadership position in the medical community. They had wanted access to my connections without recognizing my authority. They had wanted to use my professional position without respecting my professional judgment. The medical board review took 3 weeks. As chairman, I recused myself from the final determination due to conflict of interest, but I provided all relevant documentation to the board, including the detailed consultation records showing that Dr. Walsh had received explicit medical advice recommending against Mrs. Henderson's surgery from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, and had proceeded against that expert recommendation. The board found that proper medical protocol had not been followed, that expert medical advice had been ignored, and that Mrs. Henderson's death resulted from foreseeable complications that had been specifically identified by the consulting physician. Dad's malpractice insurance refused to cover the lawsuit. He lost the $2.3 million judgment. The family home was sold. His medical practice was closed. Their savings were liquidated. 6 months later, Mom called again. Jenny, your father is having chest pains again, and we can't afford to see a cardiologist without insurance. Can you take a look at him? I thought about the 3 weeks I'd spent alone in a coma. I thought about the 4 months of recovery they'd ignored. I thought about the 15 years of medical services I'd provided without acknowledgement. Mom, I said quietly, I'm not your family doctor. I never was. I was your daughter who happens to be a doctor. But daughters who spend 3 weeks in comas without family visits aren't really daughters anymore. You can't still be angry about that hospital thing, she said. We explained we were busy. Sarah's engagement was. Not angry, Mom. Just clear about boundaries. If Dad needs medical care, he should see a physician. I can recommend several good cardiologists who accept payment plans. But we can't afford. That's not my problem anymore. You'll need to figure it out yourselves. I hung up and returned to my work. On my desk was a thank you card from a patient's family, thanking me for saving their father's life in the emergency room. Next to it was a photo from the hospital charity gala where I'd been honored for my contributions to community medicine. My colleagues valued my expertise. My patients trusted my judgment. The medical community respected my leadership. For the first time in years, that was enough. The phone kept ringing, but I didn't answer. Some relationships, once broken by abandonment, can't be repaired by need. Some bridges, once burned by neglect, can't be rebuilt by desperation. I had learned the difference between being a daughter who happens to be a doctor, and being a doctor who happens to have ungrateful family members who only call during medical crises. The medical board chairman position came with authority they'd never acknowledged and power they'd never respected. When they finally needed both, it was already too late. Some consequences can't be cured, even by the best medical care.